This is the story of that flood from God's perspective. Other religions will have their perspective. This is ours. We believe that it's from God, okay? And don't take a look at the similarities. Similarities. There was a flood. Look at the differences.
Welcome to TaNaCh Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live from Kingsland, Texas, USA, with another episode of TNT, The Twisted New Testament, with Rabbi Stuart Federow, or Judaism and Christianity, a contrast based on his books. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you all have a great evening and enjoy our learning session here tonight with Rabbi. Rabbi, welcome back. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Good to see you as usual. Very nice. Very nice.
Not as much fun as when I'm in person, but you know.
That is always the truth.
Can't have everything.
That is always true. Yes, sir. Indeed. Indeed. Okay, so I've got a video clip I'm going to play. This gentleman he's got a lot of points on his mind, and we're just going to play it little by little. And we'll just, once I think he's coming to the close of a thought, we'll pause it, let you discuss that, and then we'll play it some more and continue on. This could take up the whole show because he's got a lot of questions. So just bear with us here while we get all this set up here. One moment. I got to put this in the right spot, right about there. Okay, here we go. Come on, go back to where you were. Really? Okay, right there's where I want to be at. Okay, cool. All right, here we go. Moving right on into our first topic. Here we go. That's all turned up loud where we can hear it.
Analyze the New Testament and all the ancient manuscripts, and they see how the differences are over time, and we see where things have been added on. And a lot of scholars like Bart Ehrman, I've watched a lot of his material, and he says that he thinks Jesus is deity, how people thought of him as being God came afterwards. And just the reliability of the New Testament scriptures.
Okay, do you want to address that point first, how the suspicion that the New Testament believers didn't think he was God, it was the people, and after the New Testament was canonized?
Well, I think that there's actually evidence for that fact.
Okay, let's discuss
that.
Okay,
first of all, you've got in the text of the New Testament, you have, for example, the devil tempting Jesus. And how can God be tempted, for one thing? Second of all, what does the devil tempt him with? It's all material goods. The devil shows Jesus, the nations. Okay, he shows them land, property. I forgot the word he uses. Do you remember the word he uses?
No, I don't.
Kingdoms. I think he says he showed them kingdoms, and I'll give you kingdoms.
Oh, right.
Okay. The point that I'm making is that clearly, or at least seems to me, that in the New Testament itself, the devil at least did not recognize the deity of Jesus, because he's tempting him like he would another human being. You have stories, which was another caller, by the way, we were looking at, where the stories of Jesus are to make Jesus look superior to Moses. The stories of Jesus are made to make Jesus look in control of nature.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the idea of Jesus as a Messiah, Savior, whatever, but certainly as God, developed much later. You have the same kind of thing with the history of the development of, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The Trinity is considered to be, by most scholars, a later concept of Christianity, like not developed at the year 70, the year 33 or whatever, but developed, 330 or something, at the Council of Nicaea. So you clearly have a development of theology within the Christian, within Christian history. Okay, I would argue that the description of the beliefs of Abraham are not necessarily the description of the beliefs of Jacob in terms of God. And I have no problem with the idea that that over what I forgot, 1,000 years, 3,000, whatever it is, 3,000, whatever it is, over time you have a development of theology. You also have the influence of other nations. You have what was the example? The destruction of the first temple created major trauma to the Jewish people, and they developed a religion outside the temple. They had to, because it was either that or give up. But where did they rely on to do that with? Other passages of the Bible. So, if in the Torah God says, the poor, if they can't afford the cheapest sacrifice, they should offer flour, you already have a precedent that you don't have to have a blood sacrifice for the forgiveness of sin. So when the temple is destroyed, traumatic, okay, but the emphasis goes to prayer. So I have no problem with saying that, if you'll pardon the expression, religions evolve. They change over time. I understand the beliefs, okay, that Abraham followed all 613 commandments, okay, but take that as you wish. I don't think certain things would have occurred to Abraham, and therefore he'd have had no reason to follow it, because the issue hadn't come up yet. Now you're going to ask me to give you an example, and right now I can't. But I don't see the problem with Judaism or Christianity or Islam or any other religion, showing that over time it has to answer the needs of the people, and the Judaism of the Maccabees was responding to different situations than the Judaism of Jacob. Jacob had his family to worry about. Okay, Isaiah had a whole nation to worry about. All the prophets had different issues that they had to respond to, different needs. Rabbinic Judaism developed, and as such, it had different characteristics of the world, of society in which it developed, to respond to different needs. When the Jews were exposed to philosophy, okay, or the Greco-Roman philosophy, the Greek philosophers, they had to respond to it. And as such, I have no problem with saying that the worries and needs and expectations, that Abraham had from God were not the same expectations and needs and whatever I just said by Jeremiah. So for that I have no argument.
Okay.
Take that as you will.
Okay, let's go and play it a little further. Here we
go. I was just questioning, the Old Testament scriptures, because I've always had an issue with the God of the Old Testament.
Okay, so far we've got the context of him questioning the New Testament and now questioning the Old Testament, which is kind of the reason for the title
right.
that Rabbi came up with. So we'll listen a little further, see what else he wants to kind of narrow this down.
Could never kind of reconcile Jesus in the God of the Old Testament because they seem so different.
Would you stop it there?
Yep.
And I would say, of course they're different, because Jesus and Christianity did not develop out of Judaism. They developed out of a Greco-Roman mentality, okay, of a dying, saving man God. And all the stories in the Christian New Testament are going to reflect that, and it's going to be a hard contrast with with Judaism's theology. You know, Christianity and Christians, like the caller, want to just say that Judaism and Christianity are the same, and Christianity came out of Judaism, so Christianity is just Judaism with Jesus, to quote Sophie Sagai. And it's not what it is. It's two completely separate belief systems that in many, 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 many areas are in contrast and disagreement with each other, you know, where you can't have both. So of course they're going to be different. The view of God is going to be different. Go ahead. When you play a little bit more, William, he's going to say that the way in which the devil is portrayed is different. Of course it's different. It comes out of the Greco-Roman Hades and what's his name? You know, the Roman equivalent. I can't think of his name.
Okay.
Pluto.
I'm not sure where I clicked on the wrong area of it earlier, and I don't remember where we're at. We'll just listen to part of it again here, I think.
I was just questioning, you know, the Old Testament scriptures, because I've always had like an issue with the God of the Old Testament. I could never kind of reconcile Jesus in the God of the Old Testament because they seem so different. It just seemed like the God of the Old Testament was more of like this tribal war god who wants to conquer other cities, and he doesn't care if he just kills all women and children, and life doesn't really matter.
Wait, stop there. Okay. That is a classic misrepresentation of God as portrayed in the Hebrew Scriptures compared with God as portrayed in the Christian New Testament.
Right.
Okay, but Jesus as God in the New Testament is selfish, cruel, violent,
bloodthirsty.
You know, let those who don't have me reign over them, bring them forward and kill them in front of me. Slaughter of the tree,
right?
That you know, wasn't even the time of figs. Tells his people, "Didn't I take care of you? Well, now I'm telling you to go get a sword, and if you don't have one, buy one."
Right.
He makes his own whip, according to John, not according to Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but I think I got that right. He makes his own whip to beat people in the temple who were doing what God demanded of them to do in Deuteronomy 14.
Yeah. Most people don't realize that was actually something that was supposed to be happening. There was selling animals and selling things for
right, and money changes, because wherever you come from to come to the temple, you're having a different standard of gold, standard of silver than you do at the temple.
Yeah.
You got foreign money, got to exchange it for local money, temple money. So there are other places where Jesus is violent. I can't remember the exact location, but you know, a woman comes to him for help, and he basically says, you know, I don't help dogs. It's something like that. I can't remember. And the woman has to convince Jesus to help her. These are not portrayals of a nice person. So that's one thing. Second of all, you know, this is a major misconception that people have. And I really think it has to do with the state of Israel and what's going on now. Okay. But, you know, there's this misconception that the Jews came into Canaan and slaughtered everybody who was there. And it's not true. Okay. And I know we can't put this up, but I'm going to give the verses location in the Bible, and you can see for yourself that this is true. Okay. First of all, why would God want the people of Canaan, all the various tribes and you know, nations, why would God want them wiped out? Okay. And the answer is because they were immoral. They were acting in ways that were contrary to what God wanted the people to act. And chief of which was that they would sacrifice their sons and daughters to their gods. Okay. And second of all, and we'll see this in the text, God did not want them to pervert the Israelites with their immorality and their paganism. So in Genesis chapter 15, verse 16, this is Genesis 15, verse 16. But in the fourth generation they shall come hither again, for the sin of the Amorites is not yet full. But you shall utterly destroy them, namely the Hittites and Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, as the Eternal your God has commanded you. Okay? God says that their sin has not yet become full. What does that mean? They haven't reached a point where God has to totally destroy them from their sin. God still hopes that at the last minute they'll repent. Okay? Important. Deuteronomy chapter 9, verse 5. Deuteronomy chapter 9, verse 5. God speaking to the Jewish people, the Israelites. Not for your righteousness or for your uprightness of your heart do you go to possess their land, but for the wickedness of these nations, the Eternal your God is driving them out from before you, and that he may perform the word which the Eternal swore to your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's not because you're cool, the Jews are cool, that God is getting rid of the Canaanites, but because the Canaanites were sinners, horrible people. Their behavior was reprehensible, chief of which was killing their son for the sake of their gods. Gee, does that sound familiar? Okay, another important one, Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 31. Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 31. You shall not do so to the Eternal your God, for every abomination to the Eternal which he hates have they done to their gods, for even their sons and their daughters have they burnt in the fire to their gods. Okay, Deuteronomy, when you go to the promised land, don't become like the people who live there, chief of which was their sacrificing their sons and daughters to God. Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 18. Deuteronomy 20, verse 18. That they teach you not to do after all their abominations, which they have done to their gods, so should you sin against the Eternal your God. So, first of all, they're horrible people. And second of all, God doesn't want them to teach their sin to the Jewish people and pervert the monotheism of Judaism. Okay, so God is making a value judgment against these people that their behavior has earned them destruction. But now you got to ask the question, did it happen? No, it didn't. The Jewish people, when they went into the promised land, couldn't or wouldn't defeat the Canaanites, wouldn't wipe them out, couldn't wipe them out. Okay, so Joshua, book of Joshua, chapter 17, verse 12. Joshua 17, verse 12. Yet the children of Manasseh could not drive out the inhabitants of those cities, but the Canaanites were resolved to dwell in the land. Joshua chapter 17, verse 13. Joshua 17, 13. And it came to pass when the children of Israel were waxed strong, that they put the Canaanites to taskwork, but did not drive them out. Judges chapter 1, verse 27. Judges 1:27. And Manasseh did not drive out the inhabitants of Beit Shan and its towns, nor of TaNaCh and its towns, nor the inhabitants of Dor and its towns, nor the inhabitants of Bablaim and its towns, nor the inhabitants of Megiddo and its towns, but the Canaanites were resolved to dwell in that land. They weren't strong enough to get rid of them. They didn't succeed. They didn't get rid of them. They didn't kill every man, woman, child, and animals. Judges chapter 1, verse 28. And it came to pass when Israel was waxed strong that they put the Canaanites to taskwork, but did in no wise drive them out. Judges chapter 1, verse 29. And Ephraim drove not out the Canaanites that dwelt in Gezer, but the Canaanites dwelt in Gezer among them. Judges chapter 1, verse 30. Zebulun drove not out the inhabitants of Kitron, nor the inhabitants of Nahalol, but the Canaanites dwelt among them, and they became tributary. Judges chapter 1, verse 31. Asher drove not out the inhabitants of Akko, nor the inhabitants of Zidon, nor of Achlab, nor of Achzib, nor of Helba, nor of Afik, nor of Rehov. Judges chapter 1, verse 32. But the Asherites dwelt among the Canaanites, the inhabitants of the land, for they did not drive them out. Asherites means the tribe of Asher. Judges chapter 1, verse 33. Naphtali drove not out the inhabitants of Beit Shemesh, nor the inhabitants of Beit Anat, but he, meaning the Naphtali tribe, dwelt among the Canaanites, the inhabitants of the land. Nevertheless, the inhabitants of Beit Shemesh and of Beit Anan became tributary unto them. Beit Anath, I'm sorry. So again and again and again and again, it says that the Jews did not succeed at doing what God had commanded them because they were immoral by killing all the men, women, and children of Canaan. Didn't happen. So,
All right.
and if they have any arguments about why God wanted them to do that, then take it up with God. Don't condemn the Jewish people for something they never did. Maybe should have done it because some of these groups came back to bite them in the tush later on.
All right.
You know, just, yeah.
You want me to go to play on? Continue playing?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's all right.
I mean, I used to like the book of Job, and now I just read it, and I think it's ridiculous that God, in order to prove to Satan, because Satan must be so important to God, that he wants to ruin some human's life here on earth. You know what I mean? Like Job, he didn't know why his life was getting wrecked, and it's ultimately God that allows all this type of thing, and it wipes out all his family, I mean, everything. And then in the end, I mean, what do we take from this? It says God restores, he gave him more animals and more family and stuff like this. Well, I mean, if that happened to me, I wouldn't care about more family and more animals. I'd be missing the ones that died in the first place.
Thoughts?
Okay, let me respond to that. Okay. First of all, I'm glad to know that he's a fundamentalist, that the caller is a fundamentalist and believes that the Bible has to be taken, must be taken, can only be taken literally, which, by the way, is the definition of a fundamentalist. Fundamentalism doesn't mean fanaticism. Fundamentalism means you take the book of the Bible that has to be taken literally as written and no commentaries and no interpretation of it. That's the definition of fundamentalism. Okay, and he's acting like a fundamentalist. Okay, first of all, there are two rabbis in Jewish tradition, one in the Talmud and one in the Midrash, I believe, who specifically said, okay, that Job never existed and that the whole thing was a fable, okay, like an Aesop's fable. Okay, and there, one was in the Talmud, one was in the Midrash. Okay, Genesis Rabbah, I believe. Okay, most rabbis, yes, took it for granted that there was a Job. Okay, but they argued back and forth all the time about when did he live? Where did he live? Okay, when did he live? Where did he live? They couldn't agree on it. Okay, and some said that Job wasn't Jewish. Okay, some said that he lived over here, over there. And the fact that they couldn't agree on that still lends credibility, I think, to the fact that it was a fable. Okay, but yeah, if you want to take it literally, I can only agree with you.
So,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead and complete your thought. You're good.
Well, I was just going to say that, yeah, it would stink to lose your family. Mm-hmm. But you do know that there are people who lose their family.
And there's also
whatever the reason, for whatever the circumstances are, okay, there are people who lose their family and eventually have another family. And yes, they continue to miss their old family, but they are joyful and thank God for the new family.
There's also a midrash about the story about Job, and because the Bible really only tells us from when Job was righteous and on. It doesn't talk about how he was before he became righteous. And I believe that there's a really strong truth to reaping, what you're sowing. I mean, there were things that happened in Job's life prior.
According to the Midrash.
That's what I'm talking about. But the point is, if the Midrash is true on that, then it would make sense why Job was the target. That's all I'm saying. Because
and what you're saying is true, okay, but taking the book as it stands, the issue of writing the book, the issue of the discussion in the book is about why bad things happen to good people and how do we respond to it. Mm-hmm. Okay. And as I've said repeatedly here and other places, okay, take a look at the end of the book. We are right to question God. We may not give it an understanding, get an answer we understand, Okay, but we are right to question and demand justice, because if we demand justice from God, we will certainly demand justice from other human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And we cannot understand the ways of God. Okay, there's biblical verses like that how can human beings understand, the ways of God?
Right.
And I don't mean in Job, I mean outside of the book of Job. Okay, but if you're going to take the Bible, If you're going to take the book of Job literally, yeah, of course. But I think it also represents reality.
Mm-hmm.
People lose their family, and you still have to deal with where was God when they died.
Right.
It just had just this last weekend, a family in my congregation lost their son a year and a half ago, and just lost their daughter this last weekend to a kayaking accident.
Wow, that's sad.
It's horrible. It's horrible. But it's reality. Okay? And the question is always going to be asked. Where was God? Where was God in the Holocaust? Where was God in the Spanish Inquisition? Where was God in, over and over again? And that is a constant, consistent issue for anybody who's religious. And the caller sounds like he's losing his faith in everything, which is, by the way, that's another thing I want to make sure to explain, to answer him with. And that is, Christianity is sola scriptura, especially what sounds like he's coming from, which is Protestantism. Okay, only the Bible. Can't take it literally. Fundamentalism. It's only the Bible, and other commentaries don't matter. It's only what's in the Bible that counts. You got to take it literally. Okay, Judaism has never been a fundamentalist faith, ever. And again, fundamentalism doesn't mean fanaticism. Fundamentalism means that the Bible only can be taken on its own, sola scriptura. Judaism has always had commentaries, going back to Ezra and Nehemiah, when they go back to the Promised Land, it explicitly says that they read from the Torah and explained it. Right there is source material for rabbinic discussion, argument, and democratic voting on the majority rules of how to understand it and how to put it into action. Okay, we've always had commentaries going way the heck back, 2,400 years. Some of the Midrash Rabbah is the oldest collection of Midrash. Okay, 2,200 years at least. Okay, people quoted in the Talmud are also going back that far. So we have a structure set up to understand passages that are still bothering him. And yes, they once bothered the Jews too, but we had a way to deal with it. we had a way to deal with it. And that, I think, is the advantage of Judaism. You are allowed interpretation, and you are certainly allowed to ask the questions like he's asking that lead to an interpretation that help you get beyond the problem you have with the text.
Okay, before we finish this play out, my dear friends, hope this message finds you well. If you like the way this channel is going, and the channel has been a blessing to you, please consider supporting the channel by going to the website, TaNaChTalk.com, TaNaChTalk.com. Thank you once again for your time and for supporting TaNaCh Talk. Shalom. A comment was made on Joshua chapter 10, verse 25 through 40.
Wait. Okay, Joshua
chapter 10, verse 25 through 43. Basically, the examples you gave earlier were of one accord, but this tells a different story about how God handled these battles, and they're much different. So he's wanting you to comment on that while we're in the topic of it.
Yeah, but this is an individual battle.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. Explain it.
Let's see. They're bringing out kings to Joshua, that Joshua called for all the men of Israel and said to the captains of the men of war, which went with them, "Come near, put your feet upon the necks of these kings." They came near and put their feet upon the necks of them. And Joshua said to them, "Fear not, nor be dismayed. Be strong and of good courage. Chazak ba'amatz. And thus shall the Eternal do to all your enemies against whom you are fighting. And afterwards, Joshua smote them and slew them and hanged them on 5 trees. They were hanging upon the trees till the evening. It's called war. People die in war.
Right.
When God says to take over the land, he says, kill everybody. They didn't kill everybody. But in the context of the wars they did fight, people are going to die. I don't. Okay, what about Joshua 10? The point is they're saying kill every man, woman, child. Never happened. These are about individual battles that took place. And yeah, people died in them. Kings died in them. But I don't think every man, woman, child there. I don't think that's what it said. Let's see.
Okay. So in the context of war.
Here. And all the souls that were therein, he let none remain, and he did to the king of Makkedah as he did to the king of Jericho. So yeah, you do have places where it was a wipeout.
And usually
but
that
why?
was...
But again, I'm going to ask why.
That's the question that was being keyed in, was the why on some and why not on all. I mean, I get it, because most of it's usually geographical. Depends on how far away they are. If they're bordering you, they want a complete clean slate. But if they're really, 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 really far away, then fine, bring back the women and, whatever.
And maybe it's because the people there were stronger than the Jews were, than the Israelites were. The ex-Hebrew slaves, the descendants of the slaves. Maybe they were just stronger, which is the implication of what we read in Joshua and Judges.
Got it. Okay, cool. Okay, so
but the idea that the Jews came in and killed every man, woman, child didn't happen.
Okay, all right, let's continue playing here.
It just seems very, I don't know, materialistic in a way. And the whole idea of Satan in the Old Testament versus the New Testament is completely different too. I mean, God seems sovereign over Satan there, and in the New Testament, he's like on his own, doing his own thing, opposed from God, so it's very confusing.
Stop right there, but it's not confusing. It's a completely different theological definition of the devil as opposed to the theological definition of the Satan, which we've talked about on our show and other shows pretty often. Christianity is not Judaism. Don't expect to have the same theology expressed in the New Testament that you have in the Hebrew Scriptures. They're totally different religions. They are not the same, and one did not come from the other. Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Then I'm looking into other ancient texts about like flood stories and even like the whole rib idea, a woman coming from a rib, and there's all these other ancient texts that are said to be older than, the Old Testament scriptures that we...
Let's stop right there for a second. That may be his final thought, 'cause there's only a little bit left in the timeline, but it's interesting to talk about. How do we deal with people claiming to have older text than the Torah that we have?
And my answer is quite simple. There was a flood. There was a flood. You dig down deep enough, you're going to get seashells.
Yeah.
Okay. You're going to see layers of the geological whatever it's called. Okay. You dig down deep enough, you're going to see evidence of a flood. There was a flood there. Okay. And what we have in our text is God's revelation to the Jewish people. This is the story of that flood from God's perspective. Other religions will have their perspective from they'll have their stories from their perspective. This is ours. We believe it's from God. Okay, and don't take a look at the similarities. There was a flood. Look at the differences. Okay, he's talking about the flood story. So let's talk about Noah. Okay. And the Enuma Elish, the Gilgamesh epic, okay, there's a flood, and okay, the hero goes out and gets animals and brings them back, but look at the description of the thing they floated on. Okay, in the Gilgamesh epic, in the Mesopotamian story about the same flood, it's a ship. It's not only does it have a what's it called? The thing that guides the ship, a rudder. Not only does it have a rudder, okay, but it's got another man besides the hero to run the rudder, like the captain. So in the description of the Hebrew scriptures, the boat, the ship, the ark that Noah was riding on was a shoebox, squared off, okay? It was a shoebox. And God was the captain, determining where it would go and wind up. But in the Enuma Elish, Gilgamesh epic, whatever you want to call it, the Mesopotamian story about the same flood, the boat has an oarsman, okay, who acts like the captain to determine where the ship goes. It's a theological difference. Why did the flood happen? Okay, in the pagan story, the idolatry story, two gods were fighting among themselves and poked a hole in the heavens and the water leaked out. It was capriciousness, an accident. In the Hebrew Scriptures version, no, God was making a specific statement against immorality of the people. So it's a function of morals and ethics, okay, of good and evil. And the evil had to be wiped out. And that's another theological difference. Each group writes their story of the same incident their way. So from the Jewish perspective, it's a moral issue. From the pagan perspective, it's capriciousness. Right. Look at the differences, not the similarities, because the differences is where you find the meat of the matter. You know, where's the beef? The beef is in the differences, not in the similarities.
Right. Yep. All right, let's play some more.
We have, so it seems like a lot of ideas that we have in the Bible could have came from other cultures that were around at that time or before that time.
So that was his last point. Maybe we got our stories from other people's stories.
And God is not stupid, okay? And God does not only care about the Jews. And as I've said repeatedly, our God is not so petty and small that God doesn't help somebody who doesn't have the right religion or doesn't have doesn't pray in the right name or the right God or the right religion. Our God answers the prayers of everybody. And so if there are similarities between religions, from my perspective, that only shows that God, in God's mercy, okay, makes revelation to other religions. Look, don't murder somebody. Anybody with any logic is going to come up with that. Okay? Don't steal. Very common among all cultures. Their own laws against stealing, against murder. Okay? The 7 laws of Noah are simple, obvious, basic, elemental morality and ethics. Okay? So why would it surprise anybody that some of these religions have similarities in terms of their beliefs? To me, it's obvious. To me, it just shows that people are people and have the same problems no matter where they live on earth and no matter what happens to them. Bad things happen to good people, you get Job. Okay, there's a flood, you not only get Noah, you also get, and then what's his name? Gilgamesh or whatever.
Okay, well that was the ending point of his question line.
I hope it helps.
Yep.
I thought those were good questions. They do come up every so often.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. How is the Hebrew Jumpstart video doing? I haven't looked at it in a while.
533,000 views.
That's awesome. Very cool. The reason why I asked because Ken Raff commented earlier on there. He said specifically,
Mitch should be back, so the workbook should be up in the next few weeks.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Okay, so he said Ken Raff says thank you for the How to Read Hebrew class. It's brilliant, and it's a brilliant way to teach. He said very cool. All right. 855-952-4253 is the number. I'm watching the screen. If we don't have any questions, we may just call it an early night. Usually last time I said that, we went for an hour and a half. So
T. Bishop has a question about lust.
Let's have it.
Lust? It just says Matthew 5.
Yeah, Matthew 5 on. Oh, yeah. It's for, even if you have thought this in your brain, you've already guilty of the sin. He wants to know what's Judaism's view on that.
Judaism isn't about start over. Judaism believes there's a Yetzer HaTov and a Yetzer Hara, that we have an inclination that leads us to do bad, and there's an inclination, a tendency to do good. And we're not born evil. We are what we choose to become, which puts the impetus on us to make ourselves into what we should be. Okay, so the idea in Judaism is you are going to have fleeting thoughts that are going to be lustful. But just because you have a fleeting thought doesn't mean that you're an evil person, just because you have a thought to do something that's bad. Okay? In times of stress over money, you may get a fleeting thought about doing something, illegal, immoral, but if you don't act on it, you haven't stolen anything. You haven't actually broken the law just because you have an idea. Of course you have an idea. You have a Yetzer Hara inside you that you can choose to listen to or choose to ignore. And the fleeting thought may come to your head, but if you don't follow it, it doesn't matter. Here's the problem, especially when it deals with lust and sexuality, and that is if you dwell on it. Okay? I can't remember the line and I can't remember where. Okay? But there's not... I'm not going to even quote it properly, but it's something to the effect of, there's nothing wrong with liking birds, but if you let a bird nest in your beard, you got a problem.
Right.
Something like that. I can't remember what it is. In other words, if you have a fleeting thought about something, but if you dwell on it, if it takes over your life, if you start, sorry, if you start letting it run your life, you have a problem. But the fleeting thought, just because you see, did you know that there's actually and you're going to ask me what it is, but did you know there's actually a blessing upon seeing a human being of beautiful countenance?
Yes, I have
Okay.
heard that, yeah.
What does it do?
Right.
It sublimates. What does it mean to sublimate? It means to redirect the energy to a better, more positive effect. Okay. Don't listen to me. Look it up for a proper definition. But we take our feeling, we see a beautiful woman, and we say, hey, God, thank you for putting this beauty in our world. So if you redirected your lust, your acknowledgement that there's this pretty lady in the world, and you say, thank you, God, for putting that kind of beauty in our world, you have now sublimated your lust, and you've attributed the beauty to God. You brought God into the arena, into the picture. Okay, Judaism doesn't condemn us. God does not condemn us for having an idle thought. If it takes over our lives, we got a problem. But the issue is that it took over our lives, not just the fact that we acknowledge and recognize, a pretty lady, a handsome guy.
Yep. Okay.
Totally different than Christianity, where
yeah.
you're condemned from the outset. They give you a disease you don't have, which is guilt from sins you haven't even committed, and then tell you that the only way you can be forgiven for that sin, the only way you can be cured of that illness you don't really have, is through their Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so here's an interesting question. I don't think I've ever heard it asked before. It says, what is the good news cited by the prophets? You, O Zion, who bring good news, climb a high mountain, you, O Jerusalem, who bring good news, lift up your voice strongly. What is the good news?
Well, I'm not sure what her reference is, the person's reference is.
Isaiah 40, verse 9.
Okay, wait a minute.
Okay.
See, almost every question about the Bible is answered within a few verses, beginning or ending. Isaiah what?
40, verse 9. And the concept is the New Testament, the Gospels, are supposed to be called the good news, so there's a connection there. I can see by your eyes that you are reading right now.
To me, it's in the same verse. O Zion that brings good tidings, get yourself up into the high mountain, O Jerusalem that brings good tidings. Lift up your voice with strength. Lift it up, be not afraid. Say to the cities of Judah, behold your God. Who else said, behold your God? Anybody? Anybody know who else said, behold your God? When they had the golden calf, by the way.
Oh.
Okay. By the way, who in recent times had a behold your God campaign to say to people, your God is Jesus, not God. Okay. Jews for Jesus had a behold your God campaign. Okay. Behold, the eternal God will come with strong hand, and his arm shall rule for him. Behold, his reward is with him, and his work before him. He shall feed his flock like a shepherd. He shall gather the lambs with his arm. He shall carry them in his bosom, and shall gently lead them that are with young. It's that God loves you, God punishes you, but God still loves you, and God's going to bring you back to have a, to a good, happy life.
Mm-hmm. Cool. That's a simple answer. It seems like
well,
it's all
it's
it
the
requires.
obvious answer from what the text reads. If they want to read into it something about Jesus, hey, you can read into anything you want.
Right. All right, good deal. Do you see anything in chat, Rabbi, you want to address? By the way, that last question was through an email from Sylvania Lemos. So,
are you there?
Yep, I am here. I figured if we waited long enough, you'd come on.
Here we are.
Go ahead, Ken.
Sorry.
You're good. You're good. Nature calls.
Rabbi, thank you, both of you, so much
Sure.
for the video about teaching how to read Hebrew. I can't thank you enough. I've been lucky to have some Jewish friends that live in Johnson City now, and one of them was paid by the government of Israel to teach throughout the world Hebrew to people that wanted to learn Hebrew. So I've been learning a bunch, and your video was the beginning of it, and I really appreciate it.
That's
so
great.
Thank you. Tell everybody. Thank you.
Yep, that's awesome.
I have. My question goes back to some of your answer a minute ago about fundamentalists and how I walked out of the church, and I walked out of the church and lost Jesus by becoming a fundamentalist and understanding that things, the black and white, had to say certain things, and now it gets more confusing because we don't have a rabbi anywhere near us, and so the direction
Where do you live?
can go haywire.
Ken, where do y'all live at?
We're in Johnson City, Tennessee.
Oh, yeah, right,
so
Tennessee.
there isn't a Jewish person within 1,000 miles of me, it feels like. And so we get lost in the weeds with things, and I don't know how to keep, and it's not really my job to keep anybody on track, but you become a fundamentalist, and I understand what the caller that you guys had on that was asking the weird questions about, the Jewish people killing people and all. I get what he's saying,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know how to not be a fundamentalist. How do you differentiate between what you can take word for word, what you can't take word for word? Were all the sacrifices on Passover, did it take 3 months to kill all the animals?
I think that's why it's so
Where do you
important to
draw the
have. I think that's why it's so important to have the oral Torah, because they know these things. They're handed down. They know what's fully metaphorical, what's not. So if anything seems questionable where it's not really explained there, the oral law, typically somewhere in there you'll find out what it's referring to. So, Rabbi?
No, I think you handled it. So,
Okay.
Okay.
Kim, was there any other questions you have?
No, that's it. I appreciate the time, and I hope you guys have a great night.
Hey, thank you. Have a good night too, sir. Bye-bye.
Thanks for your comments about the Hebrew Jumpstart.
Yes. Okay, cool. All right. Well, there you go. All right, we're at 50 minutes. Let's see if there's anything popping through on the question board. And I don't see anything. Nope. To my moderators out there, I thought of I think if you see a question, rather than having the person tag me in it, you can just copy their text and then tag me in it. That way I can make sure I see it, because I do scroll back up later and see that I missed a lot of things because people don't know how to tag or how to highlight a name in there.
Yeah. Actually, I don't even know how to do that either.
Right. Okay. Well, very cool. All right. Well, I'm satisfied with calling it a night if you are.
Yeah, fine.
Okay.
Look, that first caller was like a 40-minute answer.
Yeah, it really was. It really was. Okay, well, that sounds good then. Well, thank you all for tuning in. Oh, I didn't mean to sign out. Dang it. I can't multitask very well. But thank you all for tuning in. Please hit that like button and subscribe to the YouTube channel and turn on your notifications so you don't miss anything. With that being said, Rabbi, before we get out of here, do you have your books handy?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so don't forget about Rabbi's books.
Let's see. Ta-da.
I say books. It's really 3 of the same thing. There's different languages. So
Yeah, this is the English. Okay. Judaism and Christianity Contrast. This is the Spanish.
Yep.
And let's see, and you have, this is the Portuguese.
Portuguese. There you go.
Yes. Ta-da.
There you go. All righty. All right. Well, y'all have a great night, and we will see you same time, same place next week. Hashem willing. Take care, everybody. Or before then. Later. Bye. Shalom, my dear friends. Hope this message finds you well. If you like the way this channel is going, and the channel has been a blessing to you, please consider supporting the channel by going to the website, TaNaChTalk.com. TaNachTalk.com. Thank you once again for your time and for supporting TaNaCh Talk. Shalom.